Hello, Wheelsboy viewers. I have good news for you, which is that myself and Mark are here at the 2020 Beijing International Auto Show, probably one of the only auto shows we're going to have in the world this year, and we are excited to show you some of the interesting new cars and Chinese automotive culture that is happening at the show today. Mark is not with me right now. He's somewhere looking at a cool car, but I'm sure he'll join us later. So be sure to stay tuned to the channel and check out all the great content that we're making for you.
When it comes to all-out luxury, the name Rolls-Royce is near synonymous. As one of the major markets for Rolls-Royce, China is an apt place for the first time to show the new Ghost. Power for the new car comes from the 6.75-litre engine, which is the same as in the Cullinan. It produces the same amount of power as in the outgoing 6.6-litre engine, but it has a 10% increase in torque. One of the biggest pieces of news with the new Ghost is that it no longer uses a BMW platform. It uses the new architecture of luxury space frame aluminium platform shared with the Cullinan and the Phantom. If we move over to the front end, we'll notice it has a far more rounded look. The overall styling of this is described as minimalist. Well, as minimalist as a 5,549mm car can be. If you look at the Flying Lady emblem, this actually now pops out from the bonnet rather than the grille. So I should point out this is a completely new second generation. So we've moved on from the first generation, which came in two different versions over the years. So this is a completely new car. One of the major ways of telling them apart are these headlights. They're much narrower than on the outgoing model. It doesn't have the large sort of overhang which there was in the first generation Ghost. Keeping with the minimalism, we have one major line running the length of the body for styling. All 5.5 meters length of it. The car gets the same 6.75-litre engine as in the Cullinan. That gives out 563 horsepower. It has a 10% increase in the level of torque. That's enough to power this car from 0 to 100 kilometers, 0 to 62 miles per hour in 4 seconds. To handle all that power, the car gets both four-wheel drive and four-wheel steering. Wow, this interior is quite something. I think I should be a rap star. I was not expecting a purple interior. Well, obviously, this is a very luxurious interior despite the color. We are wrapped in leather, sumptuous materials. We have a large steering wheel. If you notice here, we have the Flying Lady also on the gear selector. But really, this car... Oh, and also one thing I should point out, we have a Ghost label there. And if you look at the ceiling, it actually continues the star-type symbols all over. Quite spacey, actually. But let's have a look at the rear, which is where most people who buy a Rolls-Royce Ghost will experience it from. So here we are in the back, and a Rolls-Royce is really about opulent luxury, being cosseted. There are around about 20 hides used in the leather of this car, which I'm sure will get a lot of environmentalists up in arms. And as I've mentioned, we have a starry ceiling here. These are airline type seats, which I think may recline. Yes, they do. Let's try if we can do that. Don't think the power's on. Oh yeah, it's going up. Is it? Yes. We have some movement there. Yeah. So we can move the seats in the back. We also have a champagne cooler. Now, this, I believe, is the extended wheelbase version of the Ghost. Now, one interesting thing about the champagne cooler, there are two settings on it. Now, apparently, according to the top sommeliers, champagne should be served, if it is a normal champagne, at 6 degrees Celsius. However, if it is a vintage champagne, it should be served at 11 degrees. So, Rolls-Royce, being Rolls-Royce, has two settings for cooling the champagne, depending on whether it's a regular champagne or a vintage one. Unfortunately, it looks like somebody has already drunk the bottle in here and has not even left the empty. They have left the glasses, mind you. As I mentioned, this is the long wheelbase version, so this gets an extra 130 millimeters added to the wheelbase, and we really have a lot of space in the back. Now, all I need to do is find my chauffeur and be driven home. James, where are you? And don't spare the horses.
Okay, we are now over at a car that I'm very, very excited about, and that is the 2021 Porsche Panamera. I think we're going to start, as we usually do here, with the exterior styling. There are not a lot of, this isn't a major redesign for the Panamera. This is more of a refresh, and what they've done here on the front end is, I think, one, they've made the headlights look a little bit more like the Porsche Taycan and like the new 992, 911. But here on the front, this particular model is the Turbo S, so I'm not sure if this applies necessarily to this one, but for standard Panameras, I can tell you that what was previously the Sport Design front fascia, an optional front fascia, is now the standard fascia for all Panameras, and there will be another optional new Sport Design. Remember, that's one word, Sport Design, no space, available on other models. It's important to note this is the Panamera Turbo S. There is no longer, at least for 2021, a Porsche Panamera Turbo, though I doubt anybody will be very upset about that because this new Turbo S has a full 70 more horsepower than the old Porsche Panamera Turbo. This one retains the V8 motor and makes 620 horsepower, which ought to be very, very, very impressive. I want to take a minute. Why don't we walk around to the back and have a look at the small changes there as well. So this won't take very long, but I wanted to note that there is some mild redesign going on in the rear of the new Panamera. This is just like the headlights in the front end. This has been done to kind of bring it more in line with the latest generation 992, 911. So this is more of a one-piece light design here, which is very nice. You can also see they've retained what is probably one of the best wings on the market. This part actually opens that way, and then the wing pops out from inside of there in what is probably one of the most satisfying things in the entire automotive world. I wish we could do it right now. But why don't we have a look inside and see what's new there. Sitting inside of the Porsche Panamera, in this case the new Turbo S, I can say that the interior is remarkably similar to the previous edition. I kind of expected it to have a shift knob similar to the 911, but it said it has a much more traditional one here. Other than that, oh my gosh, so this is one small detail. I don't know if you guys have ever sat in the Porsches, the Panamera, the 911 has these electronic little vents here that you have to use the touchscreen to control. It drives me crazy whenever I get inside of one. But other than that, I will say that the it's stop sign and other sign recognition software, and then lane keep assist. There's a few things that are now standard features on the on the Panamera. Now, when I get out of the car, I'm also going to show you another interesting feature, which is what we call soft close doors. So if I just get it close enough and want to film from here, I put it right there, closes there on its own. Rolls-Royce levels of luxury from Porsche these days. The Turbo S is not the only new development when it comes to motors in the Panamera lineup. The old 3-liter V6 twin-turbo entry-level engine is now gone in favor of a 2.9-liter. Now, that car is, in the entry-level motor, is 325 horsepower, which is actually 5 horsepower down from the previous generation, but I have to imagine that Porsche has made it a little bit more drivable and maybe more enjoyable, so we'll have to see when we get our hands on one. There is, of course, the Porsche Panamera GTS. I actually had the pleasure of driving a Porsche Panamera GTS Sport Turismo, and I will say that I'm devastated there is not a Sport Turismo wagon version here today for me to look at, but that GTS has another, I think, about 20 horsepower up, for 473 horsepower in the latest version. However, what we're standing next to now is what I would consider the sweet spot of the Panamera lineup. This is the 4S e-Hybrid. Now, the newer e-Hybrid models here, they have a 18 kilowatt-hour battery pack instead of 14 kilowatt-hours, which is going to provide a more useful EV-only range. And this 4S model is new. Previously, there was only the Turbo S e-Hybrid, I believe, which was a 670-some horsepower monster. But for 2021, that one is gone, at least for now. And we have the 4S e-Hybrid, which delivers 552 horsepower from a combination of the 3-liter twin-turbo V6 and a electric motor. So I think that this could be really the sweet spot of the line in terms of bang for buck. However, it should be noted that the Turbo S e-Hybrid, we're quite confident, will return in 2022, and it will probably pack over 700 horsepower. So definitely stay tuned for that.
The original MG5 was a hotly anticipated car, which simply failed to deliver. One of the main problems with it was the drivetrain, which really never lived up to expectations. The car was launched in China in 2012 and disappeared without a whimper in 2018. Plans to put it into the UK market never actually materialized, and SAIC never tried to rectify the problems with the engine and the gearbox. This is the all-new second-generation MG5, and SAIC are hoping for better things with this car. If you know your Chinese cars, you may notice that this actually looks pretty similar to the Rowe i5, which is actually a car it is based on. However, this car looks far more imposing. You've got this grille here, which obviously gives it a far better impression than the i5, which rather disappears into obscurity. Power comes from two engine choices. You've got a 1.5 with 129 brake horsepower, and you've got a 1.5 turbo, which I think gives about 173 brake horsepower. Transmissions are a 6-speed manual and a 7-speed dual clutch unit. Now, one further complication to the story is that in certain markets, the Rowe i5 is actually badged as an MG5. The i5 rides on the General Motors Delta 2 platform, which is the same that the Opel Astra K uses. Now, the MG5 is destined to go on sale in the UK pretty soon, but that will be the MG5 station wagon, and that will be based directly on the i5. What we need to know, really, is will it get this updated new front that the MG5 has here, or is this purely going to be a Chinese version, and so we'll actually have two MG5s, one for the British and foreign markets, and one for the Chinese market. Now, at the back, we've got quite a sloping roofline, almost coupe-like. Again, this is a lot more interesting than with the Rowe i5. Although if you look at the sides, you do have the same sort of swooping lines that you do have on the Rowe i5. But this, as I said, is a lot more interesting than its Rowe cousin. It's got sharp looks, particularly when it's in these bold colors like yellow here. I've also seen a green version in pictures on the internet, and it really looks good in these kind of bold colors.
I'm now here with the all-new Maserati MC20. This is Maserati's new mid-engined supercar. Now, this is a very important car for Maserati. It's their first all-new model since the Levante was introduced in 2016, and it represents the first of what Maserati claims will be 10 new or heavily revised models between now and 2023. I want to start by obviously looking at the design, and wow, this thing is a absolute grand slam. It looks fantastic, especially here in person. This is a matte paint. I didn't realize in the pictures that it would be matte, but it's beautiful. It has the classic Maserati pursed lips look, of course. I think it's a little bit reminiscent of the Maserati MC12. I should note that the MC20 name comes from Maserati Corsa 20, the year, obviously, 2020. Now, unlike the Maserati MC12, this thing is not a purely purpose-built race car. However, Maserati, as indicated by the MC Corsa name, Maserati racing name, will absolutely be putting this thing on racetracks around the world. At least they tell us that they will be. The one thing I really want to point out, go to pains to point out, is that apparently when Maserati was designing this car, the lead designer was very careful not to include too many of the vents and holes and wings that you see in so many modern supercars today. It seems as though a great many supercars use these design cues of these huge gaping holes and these gigantic wings to show off their performance potential. Now, Maserati went out of their way to not do that with this car, and I think the result speaks for itself. It is a remarkably elegant looking design compared to many of its contemporaries. Now, why don't we go ahead and have a look inside if we can. So I'm sitting here next to the Maserati MC20 interior. Unfortunately, I'm not allowed to sit in it. I guess I can't say I'm surprised. But we can still have a look at some of the interesting details. It is a remarkably simple interior. From what I can see, we have a Alcantara-covered steering wheel here with some dry-look carbon fiber. I also noticed there are some absolutely massive shift paddles that kind of speak to the performance potential and hopes for this vehicle. I really love the design of these seats. They seem obviously very supportive. They clearly designed by Seibelt. Seibelt, obviously a very well-known manufacturer of seats, especially racing seats, so I have no doubt that they will do a great job on the track and everything. Lots and lots of carbon fiber parts here in the center tunnel. From what I can tell, there is going to be multiple modes. There's a GT, a Sport, a Corsa, and then, of course, the scary one, ESC off, which I personally, if I ever get my hands on one of these, will probably not be trying. On top of that, we of course have a center touchscreen here, which I have to admit, I haven't seen a center touchscreen like this in a while. This is a very kind of landscape-oriented touchscreen. It's actually very thin. I would be curious. I hope I can get a chance to interact with it and see how it is to use. One thing I will also point out here on the steering wheel, there is a launch button. No jokes, people. There is absolutely a launch button. No menus to go through, no nothing. They want you to go straight to what absolutely matters. Other than that, there's huge swaths of Alcantara, like I said, here on the seats, on the dash, lower, up here on the top of the dash. I'm going to reach in. Hopefully they don't get mad. That's not, if that's leather, it's not very good leather. I'm going to guess that's either pre-production quality or it's simply a very thin leather that they're using to save weight. But I think that this thing obviously is not making any qualms about the fact that it is looking to make a big performance show on the track. So it looks very fun. So if we look here, we can see this dry carbon fiber that makes up the doors. I would also like to point out that this is like most cars in this field these days, other than perhaps Ferrari, which is still using aluminum, this is a carbon fiber tub, in this case developed along with Dallara, who is very famous for developing sports cars and, more importantly, race cars. Let's go ahead and if we walk back here, let's talk about what I think really matters, which is this. This is, I think, Nettuno. Nettuno is the Italian word for Neptune. That's the name that they've given this engine. In this case, it is a 3-liter twin turbocharged V6, putting out 621 horsepower and I think over 500 pound-feet of torque. The that puts the specific output at over 200 horsepower per liter, which is rarefied air, to be sure. Now, one of the interesting things about this engine is it used something called pre-chamber combustion or ignition. And what that means essentially is that before the fuel is sent into the combustion chamber, there's a pre-combustion chamber, a small one kind of above it, in which they first, during the compression stroke of the piston, they inject a little bit of fuel and have that combust, and then that spreads into the main combustion chamber. And if you're wondering what this does, it creates more efficiency and more power, which is obviously something you really want. And if you want to know, what's the credibility of this, I will tell you that Formula One cars use this technology, so you know that it is absolutely legit. I think that so the Nutino. I'm sorry, my English is better than my Italian. Is going to be, absolutely the heart of this engine. So, or the heart of this car. I wish they would start it. That's the only thing I'm missing, is I wish I could just hear what it sounded like. But we'll have to wait and maybe see that some other time.
And we have here the Precept concept. So this came out earlier this year, but this is the first show it's actually been seen at. When it was launched, it was actually just done as an internet launch thanks to all the COVID-19 problems. The car offers a glimpse of Polestar's future, both with the design lines and also with some of the ethos about the brand. Now, one thing that Volvo actually mentioned, I think about 2 or 3 years ago, that it was going to commit more to sustainability. So in fact, Volvo produced an XC60 which contained a lot of recycled materials. The Polestar here goes a whole way further. I should have mentioned with the Polestar 2 earlier, the Polestar 2 does not have a leather interior, which is what you would normally expect from a luxurious car. In fact, it has what's known as vegan leather. Now, vegan leather is actually a plastic. So, of course, there's all sorts of environmental problems with plastics. Okay, in some ways, those are not as bad as with leather, with the chromium process of actually tanning the leather. But still, plastics, as we all know, have all sorts of problems that many people most of the world is trying to get away from the use of. So, vegan leather in itself has its problems. However, the Precept goes a whole way to actually rectifying that by using recycled materials for its vegan leather, and it also uses a lot of hemp fibers as well. Hemp is a plant that is very fast growing, uses very little water, and can be used for various parts of the car. So the interior of this car is actually pretty special. So with a lot of these materials, they are made from recycled materials. So I'm not sure exactly what we're actually looking at, but I think with this is the vegan leather. And on the Polestar 2, this is actually just made from normal plastic, which is basically virgin plastic. However, on this car, it is, I think, completely recycled plastic, or at least a large content of recycled materials. We also have use of hemp. I think I'm right in saying that there is also some use of hemp in the materials. This possibly is it, but I'm not exactly sure which parts are the hemp. So what they're trying to do here is make a far more sustainable car in all aspects. So it's not just about recycling at the end of the life, it's about using materials that are sustainable right from the word go. So we're here at the BMW stand with the new M3. What do you think of it, Ethan?
Well, everybody knows that the M3 is the gold standard for the past 30 years or so for sports sedans, especially, mid-sized sports sedans or small sports sedans. But we also know that the previous generation, I believe it was the F80, was considered kind of not a failure necessarily. It was still a fast car, but after how amazing the E92, E90 M3 with that beautiful 4-liter V8 engine was, people were a little bit disappointed. Last one came off as a little bit numb, a little bit less involving. And so there is a lot of weight being put on this latest generation, I think the G30, M3 and M4, of course. Now, there's something we have to talk about, and that is the face. Now, Mark and I have been walking around the auto show for the whole day, and one of the things that keeps coming up between the two of us is the fact that we kind of have a differing opinion on this. Mark, what do you think of the new styling on the 3 Series?
I like it. And Ethan?
I don't really like it very much at all. Mark, you used some phrases that I thought helped me kind of appreciate it a little bit more. When you first see it, it's like a pig. It's just like a pig face. It's got these big, giant nostrils as opposed to the arguably more elegant-looking kidney grills on some classic BMWs. This thing takes on the huge mug of things like the X7, the latest 7 Series. It seems as though the grills are getting just bigger and bigger every year. Now, you pointed out something, as I was saying, that gave me pause. Why do you think that is? What do you think is accomplished by having such a big grill?
Well, I think it makes it stand out a lot more than previous BMWs have. With a lot of the other BMWs, they have been quite restrained, and in some ways, I suppose that's what BMW sells itself on, but I like something which has got a bit more presence, and this has certainly got presence.
Presence is one word for it. I will admit that all of the press photos that I saw previously had big chrome nostrils on the car, which I definitely didn't like. This slightly more low-key black look on this particular M3 is very nice. And I also have to say, I like almost any car in green. Green is a cheat code for me when it comes to cars. So I think they made this one specially for me. It's this M3 specifically, and I'm sure the M4 as well, they have these extensions here on the hood, these bumps, which seem to almost accentuate the size of the nostrils here on either side on top, which it's a brave choice. But again, I have to acknowledge, Mark, that what you're saying does have some sense to it. The concept of presence, like head turning. Nowadays, car companies really want a design that people are going to have go by and then go, whoa, what was that? And that's what I said when I first saw this. I just don't know if it was a good thing.
I think it also, though, harks back to some of the BMWs of the past with the way it looks, and I think that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's both futuristic and retro at the same time, if it's possible to be such a thing.
Yeah, I remember recently Mark sent me an article where he tried to make the comparison between this and the BMW 503 from the 50s or 40s, I think?
That's correct.
Yes, and I almost laughed myself to death because that one, yes, those were also very tall, but they were also very thin, I would say very elegant. So you're not completely wrong. This is not something that came completely out of the blue. But having said that, I don't know, man. It's provoked. I'll give it this much. I hate a boring car. And there is nothing boring about the front end of this new 3 Series.
One thing, the 503 was a lot narrower, so this is it's stretched if you think about it.
Okay, fine. We'll talk about the proportions. Now, we've talked enough about, I think, the front end design and stuff, and we'll talk a little bit more about the other parts of the design. But while we're standing next to the front, we might as well talk about the engine, which of course is kind of the heart of the M3 and M4. In this case, it's the 3-liter twin turbo inline 6, of course, because it's a BMW. The regular version has 473 horsepower and near as much torque, and then the competition version pumps it up to 503 horsepower. Now, there is going to be an all-wheel drive version. In fact, I believe that the launch editions are all all-wheel drive. Rear-wheel drive will come later. And then, just as importantly, they got a manual.
That makes all the difference, doesn't it?
It does. It's not just I believe it would have been an 8-speed automatic. I don't know if it's a DCT or if it's an automatic.
It's almost certainly a DCT, but I'm not sure about that.
Usually they have a DCT, but I don't think anybody was doubting that the performance of this car was going to be anything but amazing. But what myself and I think a lot of M3 or BMW M car enthusiasts are really concerned about is this just going to be even more of an even number experience, a more numb experience than the previous generation F80 was, because that was the big critique that they gave for that. So that's something that we'll only know once we get to drive it.
Are you suggesting we drive it out of here?
If only we could. We're inside of the brand new BMW M3, and we're just going to have a look at some of the features that stick out to us. I love a good Mark. How do you feel about this awesome red start-stop engine button?
It's got to be red. What other color could it be?
That's exactly how I feel. Also, what do you notice? What's the thing that's sticking out to you right now, Mark? Because my foot is on something really important. What's that? That's the clutch. This is a manual, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, it feels so good. And now we really do have to drive this thing out of here. I don't even care at this point what the front end looks like. I just want to drive it. But we will do a little bit more of a look here. I'm sure it has the latest generation of the iDrive system.
Yeah, that's 7.0. 7.0 is the latest version of the iDrive system.
Okay, considering iDrive's come along. Did you ever interact with earlier generations of iDrive?
I have, yeah, and they're not necessarily that good.
No, that was actually what I was going to say. Is that unfortunately the iDrive, my experience with earlier generations of iDrive was never very good.
One thing I should point out with the latest version of the iDrive, it can get over-the-air updates, and I think it's also got voice-activated controls as well.
Okay, very good, very good. That's a thing that we're seeing in more and more cars these days since Tesla started that years ago. Let's see, lots of swaths of carbon fiber, of course, shiny carbon fiber. Is that? No, you know what? That's not carbon fiber. This is a really interesting look. I'm not sure if you can see it. It's a lattice. Yeah, it looks as though almost like a kind of like an aluminum or something, kind of a weave. It's actually quite beautiful, and it's not carbon fiber, which carbon fiber, unfortunately, these days is an overused material, in my opinion. Everything seems up to BMW qualities. I just love this. This makes me so happy. We've got our infotainment screen here in the center. I'm struck by how. Let's see. Turn it on a little bit. There we go. I'm struck by how long it is. This is something I noticed. I think it was in the. Trying to remember. There's a couple of cars that I've been in today that have had much more. This is I feel like a new thing, a landscape style screen. You're seeing some cars even where the dash, the screen here for the dashboard is just extending all the way across like a Porsche Taycan. So that's a new styling feature nowadays.
Although this doesn't quite do that, there is a bit of a gap there, and it actually comes out a bit more than with some of the other cars that we've seen today.
It's true. It's definitely a more traditional look. The final thing that I will note is, of course, if we look on the steering wheel, we have our M buttons. That debuted, I think, in the what would have been the V10 M5 back in the mid 2000s. That was the first one to have that. Yeah. So now they've got two for you. So this is your M for the weekend and your M for the weekdays. But overall, definitely seems up to BMW standards of quality. And so why don't we get out and have a look at the rest? In fact, actually, hold on. Mark has a final comment. Mark?
You've missed one thing. Look at this upholstery. It's wild, man. So, I like it. I really like it. Although I'm not too sure it goes too well with the green on the outside, mind you. But this has got some sort of presence.
Why don't I move so they can see? This is definitely. It looks like these are heated, probably cooled seats as well.
Oh, they must be. They must be cooled.
Yeah. They've got Alcantara here. Mark is right. I should not have. I should have not have skipped that. This is what color is this? What color is this, Mark?
Gosh.
Is it orange or is it camel? It's not camel.
I would say it's sort of a tangerine. A tangerine. What do you reckon?
I think tangerine is a good way to put it. Yep. There we go. Before we finish, we'll show you guys the view that BMW hopes it will be showing all of its competition, which is the rear end. It doesn't look like this is a competition version of the M3. I know this because, from my understanding, competition versions will have a black, kind of a matte look exhaust tip as opposed to these chrome ones, but all of them will most likely include this very impressive looking spoiler, which looks, I think, probably looks more at home on a race car than on a, what is arguably a small sedan. But overall, it's definitely a very aggressive look. What do you think, Mark?
It's definitely aggressive. And one thing I'd like to mention is just about the overall look of the car. It's far more curved than a lot of the BMWs that we've seen in the past. One thing that I'm going to actually name a competitor here, which they will be, I'm sure, really pleased about, with the Jaguar XF. When that came out, to me, that was suddenly like a whole new era for Jaguar, in that previously they'd been what I considered quite staid and boring with its box-like exterior. And I see with this car today, it's gone away very much from the more boxy-like BMWs that we've seen in the past. And for me, certainly, I like that. Okay, I know we've got our differences of opinion about the grille, but as I said, for me, that gives its presence. I wouldn't say I would go all the way and say I actually really like it or love it, but it's certainly got presence, and I can see for me, it's a lot more interesting than the BMWs in the past.
Sure. You heard it here, folks. Mark thinks that this is the most beautiful BMW that's ever made.
No, I don't.